Hello everyone. Is Azur Lane running out of ships? No. Alright, video's over. Bye. Joking aside, that no should be followed by a but there's a nuance. Let me elaborate. Azur Lane is an old game, comfortably over 8 years old, and the way it handles its roster is indicative of that. Back then, games with enormous rosters that released multiple characters at a time, sometimes to those characters' detriment, were more common. AL has a finite amount of ships to turn into characters. They can't just invent more. And unlike many other gachas, they don't really do ults. Kind of. There is some, but they're few and far in between. There's also technically metas, but they're a weird grey area since they're also new characters. Point is, after all this time on this release schedule, we have completed the set, as it were, on a number of classes. If the devs hadn't let it to rot, the collection tab would be quite extensive about now. And we'd be a fair bit richer. With many classes complete, the number of notable ships is dwindling, especially for the smaller factions. A lot of big names have been hit, and larger combatants like capital ships and heavy cruisers are running low. Which is doubly problematic because they love headlining events with a main fleet ship. Don't get too caught up in dooming though. As I said at the start, that doesn't mean we're running out of ships. We might have over 700, but that's probably still about half of our total options. However, those remaining ships are overwhelmingly subs and destroyers, with a healthy amount of light cruisers and a surprising amount of carriers, albeit those numbers are hard carried by two factions. I don't deny that there are subs and DDs whose arrival we are still eagerly awaiting, but as a whole, I don't think people are going to be into swarms of these smaller ships. We're already getting DDs for days, with events like Martyrium and Substellar having 3 each, but there was at least some variety to offset that. This has, as one would expect, affected newer releases. Destroyers were not built like this a few years ago. These aren't World War II destroyers, they're modern. They're from fucking World War III. It's not just the big late war ones either, Z11 sisters are not built like that. It's almost as if they're trying to make destroyers more palatable for the player base as a whole, instead of releasing a storm of lollyboats. It's also why we've been seeing more paper ships lately. They have to dip into them in order to give several factions more than just the scraps. It's not just variety either, it's filling up the higher rarities. Look at the Italians. The only golds they have left off the top of my head are the final Zara sister, earlier versions of the current gold light cruisers that could maybe scrape by, and that's about it outside of those smaller combatants. That's like a single major event. To say less of any ultras. Most factions are pretty fucked on that front. But they aren't just gonna not release events for a faction that's running out of ships. You know how people get when someone goes too long without. And the devs aren't just gonna throw their hands up and say, sorry, they're out of ships, so Eagle Union or Royal Navy gets the event instead. Or, you've been ever so patient waiting for this faction's next event, here's 4 destroyers and a submarine. That shit's gonna get old real quick. Can you imagine how poor factions like Ironblood and Northern Parliament would be without paper ships? Their backlines would have no aviation. And the battle fleets would peak at Bismarck and Arkhangelsk. As much as people like to bemoan their existence, paper ships have helped significantly in staving this off. So if you take anything away from this video, maybe try and make your peace with them. Event rosters would be a lot more boring without them. So, to conclude, despite 8 years of continued service and well over 700 ships, Azur Lane is not in danger of fully running out of ships anytime soon. We could probably comfortably hit 15th anniversary without worrying about it. However, unless you're Eagle Union, or to a lesser extent Royal Navy, you become increasingly reliant on paper ships to fill the newly formed gaps appearing in most factions' roster, lest they become inundated with a storm of mostly destroyers and subs, or twist themselves into knots trying to justify why and how dead World War I ships should keep appearing in this World War II boat waifu game. That's it from me today, so until next time, fair winds and following seas.